Greetings everyone, I'm Record2nd and welcome to a quick video about my data packs, my main ongoing projects that are getting consistent updates to pretty much every new Minecraft version that comes out. So this video will not cover more mobs because it's more of a major project that gets updated once in a while. So this video will be about Nether weather, overskip, mob tweaks, and last but not least, recipe tweaks. And I'll be telling you about the new stuff that was added to these packs for the Copper Age drop, but also a little bit about the future in the upcoming winter drop, the Mounts of Mayhem drop. But first, obviously, let's do the Copper Age. And as always, there's a handy in-game changelog. So if you don't care about this, you just want to check this by yourself, you can. And you can skip to the later section because the second half of this video is going to be about the Mounts of Mayhem ideas that I have. First, let's start with Nether weather. And honestly, the only real change here is that there was a major feature overlooked for the previous update. And what I overlooked is that happy ghasts should not take damage if they are covered with a harness, because it should protect them from both the storm effects because it's made of leather and also the lava fall because it covers the top of its body. If you have a harness on your happy ghast, they will now survive any nether weather event. Now, to continue with the theme of the nether, let's talk about the That's interesting. Anyways, let's talk about the overskip changes. So as always, you can read the changelog, and basically I added two noteworthy things. So first, let's spawn a trader if we can. This is just skipping. I'm just skipping the timer, and as you can see, I heard it spawn in. I even saw on the subtitles the direction in which it spawned, but it's a bit randomized where it's located. So okay, there he is. So yeah, it was pointing me to the right direction. I just didn't know there's a little cave out here. So there is our lost trader, and let's see what this guy sells. Now this guy will now buy hay bales, and the reason why I changed it from the previous version is because in overskip it's not that hard to get wheat, because you spawn on a grass block with two dirt blocks underneath, and using those two dirt blocks you can craft it with gravel to make coarse dirt, and if you till coarse dirt you get regular dirt, so you can multiply dirt for as long as you want because the gravel is renewable through piggly bartering. And then you can bone meal the grass block and have the grass spread on the dirt blocks placed near it, and you can get wheat seeds and you can grow wheat, because actually you can grow stuff in the nether even though there's no water, you just have to plant it really fast. That's why this is like that. Now he will no longer buy water bottles, because even including the recipe that I added a couple versions ago of crafting water bottles using gas tiers, it's still quite expensive to get, even if it is renewable through piglet bartering. For the average player, much easier to get a hay bale in the nether when they're playing overskip rather than a water bottle. So that was the main change, and of course you can now tell where it spawns, so you never miss when a lost trader shows up in your world. And that's basically it for these two. Now let's get into recipe tweaks, and this one has received the most major update, even warranting a new major version number 1.6. Let's get into all of the new stuff in this version of recipe tweaks now. So first, there's a new saddle recipe using 3 leather, 2 string, and 2 iron nuggets. So it's much cheaper on the iron. I think it matches the shape of the saddle more, and I think string is such a cool early game important Minecraft resource that eventually becomes pretty easy to get, but I think it just makes the recipe more logical and more Minecrafty, and it looks more like the saddle that you actually get when you craft it. So I like this recipe change a lot. There's a bunch of other recipes that have been changed. For example, these are the new chain recipes. You now use iron nuggets and copper nuggets in this kind of formation. Not only is it much cheaper to craft this way, not only do you not have to use another type of version of the item to craft, you can just craft with one single item type. But also, I think the shape of it makes more sense with the chain, so I'm a big fan of this particular change. Since recipe tweaks adds iron horse armor recipes, gold horse armor recipes, and diamond horse armor recipes to match the leather horse armor recipe, you can also now make copper horse armor. One more thing that I did is I added new recipes so that you don't have to craft a torch from scratch to get a copper torch or a soul torch. You can now convert existing torches to the versions, and it's grouped with the other recipes and unlocked at the same time as well. So I think it's a good change to the game. Honestly, why don't they have it already? You can also convert lanterns and campfires into their soul versions with this method as well. And last but not least, there are now copper golem statue recipes. So for example, you can craft copper chests with copper, and chests you do need only 8 ingots instead of 9, but you still lose the golem, so that's a big drawback. And it's similar in this case because you do need to use a full block of copper and a carved pumpkin, but you don't get the chest. So I think it's also following the vanilla logic of the chests, this crafting recipe. And it also doesn't require you to have to make a copper golem and just wait for it. If all you want is the statue and you don't care for the golem itself, you don't have to wait anymore. You can just pick whatever type of copper you want. There's waxed and non-waxed versions as well. I just don't have them all unlocked on this world. And you can make the exact copper golem statue that you want. I think it's a really good change to the game, and honestly kind of just adds something that's missing in Minecraft right now, because just think about this. If you didn't look at all the Minecraft lives and the news and their social media stuff, and imagine 2 years from now, after the copper golem stops being promoted a lot in the launcher and other places, how would you even know that it exists? If you miss this update and you come back to Minecraft, how would you know that this is in the game now? So obviously I'm not expecting new players to be using my data packs that much, but I do think this kind of brings the feature more into the world of Minecraft, which I think fits well. And why not? It's a new recipe, and it makes getting copper golem statues easier. Now let's get into the last but not least data pack. It's mob tweaks. So the main thing you will notice is there's a couple things that I changed with the copper golems. For example, they now have this white smoke particle when they have a task, or if they are currently performing a task. If I spawn a copper golem somewhere where there are no chests, or the chests are empty and there's nothing to do, they're going to display black smoke particles. As you can see, this guy here is confused. Until he resets his tasks, he will check the chest again and producing white smoke particles. Then he'll find nowhere to put his item, producing black smoke particles again. So these two guys are confused. I'm not sure why I had this set up a while ago, but this better communicates to you what's happening in the brain of the copper golem, which I think is a nice addition. And we'll go back to this area to show you something else I added. So if you're really observant, you might have noticed that this copper golem is moving faster than it does in vanilla, and there's a good reason for that. And let me show you what this golem is like when it's about to turn into a statue. This copper golem is much slower now than he used to be when he was not oxidized. So we can scrape it off, and you will see there's a noticeable improvement in the speed. This stage, the exposed stage, the copper golem will be the same speed as it is in vanilla, but now in the default stage it is faster than vanilla. These are pretty small, so I don't think these should affect the game too much, but I do think it's a good world building feature. It matches with, for example, the copper bulbs getting dimmer as they oxidize, and I just think it's a cool touch to the game that doesn't break too much stuff. This might require adjustment in terms of whatever redstone contraptions you use for the copper golem. But to compromise, I made the vanilla copper golem a little bit faster, and since this is a data pack, you kind of accept the fact that, you know, some mechanics might be a little bit different from vanilla, and you might have to adjust your farms or redstone mechanisms. I think it's not too unreasonable to expect that kind of thing. It's a small change, but I think it adds a bit to the world and makes the copper golems feel more real, and it also works together, because when they become slower and then eventually turn into statues, I think it makes more sense and it feels more natural that way. But that's not the only thing in this update. I also changed the trades for these villagers. So if you were playing previous versions, you will remember that instead of selling iron tools, they used to sell you golden tools, and instead of diamond ones, they sell iron ones. Well, since we now have copper tools, there are no more gold tools in their trades, only the copper ones. So now that we've leveled this guy up, we will see now that he sells iron items instead of diamond ones as before, but now he will sell copper ones instead of golden ones like in the previous versions of the data pack. Here's a better demonstration of this. And another thing that I did is I fixed the bug of where you had this kind of profession of a villager which sells equipment, and they haven't locked in their trades yet. You can replace the workstation and they will sell you iron stuff again instead of the golden stuff that was before, or instead of the copper stuff that's now going to be the standard from now on. I fixed that bug, so now they will only sell you copper stuff as the first level of the trades that they will offer to you. And that's basically it for the Copper Age in terms of these 4 data packs. Now we're going to be talking about Mites of Mayhem and the ideas I have for these data packs when it comes to the next updates that they will receive. And if you point out that the villagers obviously only use iron stuff, they don't have any copper stuff, well, in the Mites of Mayhem snapshots you can find copper spears in villager chests, so checkmate. Villagers canonically use copper confirmed. And now let's get to the actual Mites of Mayhem stuff. Before we begin though, I do want to announce that, I mean, I've posted this before on other platforms, mainly on Discord, which by the way, you should join the server, but I haven't really posted this on the channel. The news is I've actually started making resource packs, which is something I hinted at previously before, but never really got into doing it. And it's nothing like that huge. I would say my main resource pack that I've done is this. this is more music, and it adds a bunch of music, a bunch from Perch. There's one track made by Green Pixel, so community members, but also stuff from Minecraft Dungeons and Minecraft Earth. And there's probably going to be more stuff coming in the future as well. I'm currently going through Minecraft Dungeons soundtracks and like finding more music that would fit Minecraft, which is not a lot, but some of it does work. And also, this is a no movie references resource pack, so it removes movie references and it just replaces the chicken jockey music disc with this unused C418 song from one of the old Minecraft albums. So yeah, those are like small little things, and we're probably going to be making more resource packs in the future with other features that I think would be cool in the game. But yeah, check them out if you want. I'll leave a link in the description. But now let's get on to the data packs. So first, let's start with what I want to add to Nether Weather and to Overskip. So there was one more oversight that I realized I didn't address with Nether Weather before, and it's that wolf armor, horse armor, and a bunch of other stuff like that doesn't protect their respective mounts from the Nether Weather effects. So I am going to be adding that. For example, wolf armor will protect wolves from taking damage in the Nether if there's a Nether Weather event going on. Also, horse armor obviously should protect the horses from the damage as well. And eventually, when the Nautilus mobs get added, it will also logically be protected from Nether Weather events. And yeah, we only have 2 snapshots to play with so far, so we don't have that much content that we know about. There will be more stuff added, so maybe I'll have more ideas or something will change. But so far, judging by the 2 snapshots that we have already, those are the ideas that I have. So let's continue. In terms of Overskip, there isn't that much that needs to be added, I don't think. So that might just be a regular port update without that much content in it or anything specifically addressing the stuff in the update. Now for recipe tweaks, I do have an idea, and that is to make craftable Nautilus armor, because frankly, we already have craftable horse armor in the pack. Might as well just make that a thing, and it's going to look basically like this. I think that's a very fair feature for recipe tweaks. But that's all I have for now, because we haven't really gotten any new crafting recipes aside from the spears, so I'm not sure what else I could address in the next update for recipe tweaks. Now let's talk about the mob tweaks update, which would be the most exciting because I have the most ideas when it comes to that. So first of all, there's a bunch of stuff that I would like to add regardless of the amounts of Mayhem content, and that was already planned before in advance. And there's stuff specifically related to the Mounts of Mayhem update that I would like to add. And I will discuss the Mounts of Mayhem specific stuff first, because I assume that's what you're mostly interested in. But at the end of the video, I will discuss other stuff that I'm planning for the future of mod tweaks, which is likely going to be the next update. In case you're interested enough in that pack, you can just stick around and listen to that. But let's talk about the Mounts of Mayhem stuff first. So I would like to add more improvements to the Nautilus mob, and it's honestly not going to be that much stuff. For example, I think the baby Nautilus can drop a Nautilus shell when it grows up, because it makes sense. I think it follows Minecraft logic with armadillos and turtles shedding parts of their shells and when they grow up in some cases. So I think it's a very Minecrafty thing to add. I also would make the Nautilus, the zombie Nautilus, more of a hostile presence in the game. Like sometimes you can encounter them and they would be aggressive and you wouldn't be able to tame them, but you could use them to get Nautilus shells. So they would have a higher chance of dropping the Nautilus shell on death. Obviously, the tameable zombie Nautilus would still remain in the game because that's a cool feature. I'm not going to get rid of something like that, but I just think it would be really cool to add more zombie Nautilus presence in general without making it too easy to get, and also by adding a new underwater monster, because I mean, like I said, it's only been 2 snapshots, so they might add something like this. You never know, but so far, I don't think we have enough underwater hostile creatures. That could be fun to fight, so I think a zombie Nautilus that's always aggressive for whatever reason could be a fun addition to the game. For example, in mod tweaks, if you have a settled mob, you can just do that. With pigs and striders, you don't have to use shears like they added a few versions back. You can just do it with your empty hand, like this. And that's something that I would add to the Nautilus mobs as well. And of course, I would integrate the zombie Nautilus and the regular Nautilus with my other features. For example, in mob tweaks, a drowned can sometimes mount other underwater creatures to use as jockeys. For example, large salmon can be ridden by baby drowned, or turtles can be ridden by baby drowned, and also drowned can ride skeleton horses. So now that we have the Nautilus mobs, I would add them to that system. I also might be interested in the idea of an untamed Nautilus fighting regular Nautili mobs. I just think it's a bit of world building that could make a lot of sense, considering that zombies are aggressive to players and villagers. And speaking of, I might just replace the salmon jockey with the nautilus jockey or zombie nautilus jockey, but I'm not sure. I do like that feature still. Let me know what you guys think about that. But currently we had chicken jockeys that spawn in the ocean, and I replaced the chickens with large salmon. But now that we have the nautilus mobs, I might just replace the salmon there. But who knows, I might keep the salmon, I might make it a 50-50 thing. I'll see. Another thing I would add is a baby zombie nautilus, and also I would make it easier to get baby zombie horses, because from what I've seen so far, I don't think that zombie horses can spawn as babies naturally in the new snapshots. We only have the adult zombie horses with the adult zombie riders, so it'd be fun to see like a baby version of that. That would be very cute. And it would be cool to get a baby zombie horses just as a unique creature to have in your zoo, for example, or if you have a collection of mobs, just because it's kind of cool. By the way, unrelated, but to all the fucking people who complain, oh, Inkor, why'd you make the zombie horses burn, bro? That sucks. Well, Mojang just did it themselves, okay, bro? There you go. This is vanilla now. This is not my data pack. And you can now put horse armor on them if they are tamed. So yeah, all the fucking people who complain about me doing this, Mojang just did it themselves, so yeah. I just added the same thing, but before they did, so I'm not a monster, I'm just ahead of the curve. Anyways, as you can see, same as with mob twigs before this, if you put armor on your undead horse, it'll be alive. So it'll be protected from the sunlight, which makes perfect sense. And which is why I added this in the first place, so you now can stop complaining because it's now in vanilla, because I had the right mindset. But something that is new is that you guys might have noticed that in the previous versions there was no display for the horse armor, so you couldn't see it on the horse, but now you can, and this is in vanilla, which is fantastic. It now works on the skeleton horse as well, and I really hope they don't touch this, because this is literally perfect. I'm still setting the fire myself, because like I said, I think that just makes perfect sense. I understand why Mojang retroactively does not want to make skeleton horses start burning under sunlight, but this is part of mob tweaks, it always has been, and now you can see the armor on the skeleton horse, which, dare I say, looks really fucking cool. So now we are completely consistent with everything else in the game. We have the zombie nautilus, which will burn under sunlight. With mob tweaks, the skeleton horse will now burn under sunlight, and in vanilla as well, the zombie horse burns under sunlight. So everything is consistent and perfect. But speaking of horses, something that is incredibly annoying is that horses love wandering off. And this is why people either have to carry a leash and a fence on them at all times when they have a horse, or they just end up digging horse holes so that the horse cannot get out and wander around. What I want to add to mob tweaks is I want to add a reduced wandering radius for horses, camels, striders, pigs, and happy ghasts that have saddles or harnesses equipped, which makes sense because they just added this for the nautilus mobs. If you have a nautilus and it has a saddle on, it will not wander as far as it would, and this is consistent. I just want to add the same behavior to other mounts because it's extremely annoying when they are wandering around really far away, especially with horses and donkeys and mules and stuff. That's basically it in terms of the specifically mounts of Mayhem related things I would like to add to mob tweaks. Now let's move on to features that I just want to add in the foreseeable future that are not specifically tied to the theme of the update as much. Now I think they did a good job with the spears, but I might expand on that concept and add more spears. For example, maybe sometimes Vindicators will spawn with spears instead of axes. That could be fun. I could also imagine with the skeletons spawning with spears as well. That could be a cool, unique thing to encounter once in a while. But one thing I would like to add to mob tweaks is to expand on the idea of mobs holding equipment. I already did a bit with the zombified piglins, but I think we can do more. For example, in this biome in the Nether Wastes, I think that piglins should spawn with pickaxes instead of swords, or at least there should be some amount that do, because that's where all the ore is. And in the Crimson Forests, piglins should spawn with hoes and axes because they're in a forest. That makes perfect sense. I also think it could be fun if baby piglins also spawn with pickaxes sometimes to imply child labor, because I think that's something that piglins would totally do. And in contrast, we could add sometimes spear wielding piglin brutes, because I think piglin brutes can be a little bit too punishing in this game. So some of them having no ability to disable your shield could be fun. And also they are fast, so they would still do a lot of damage. I don't think it would debuff them that hard. And of course I can extend this to overworld biomes as well. I would like to replace zombies holding shovels and swords in every single biome and environment to them holding specific tools in specific places. For example, they can be holding shovels in deserts and swamps. They could be holding pickaxes underground, and they can have different tiers of tools depending on where they spawn. So if they spawn on the surface, they will just have wooden tools. But if they spawn underground, they would have stone tools. But if they spawn really deep underground, they get iron and copper tools. I think that could be a cool piece of world building to add to the game with this pack. And we could extend that to the drowned as well, so they could have different items depending on when they spawn, so they don't all have tridents in the nearest river killing you on sight. By the way, in terms of the drowned, I want to debuff them a bit, but I also want to make them more fair to you. Like I already mentioned, they can spawn in rivers and shallow oceans with tridents, which are extremely powerful, and in the early game it's just simply unfair to have that kind of enemy that you have to deal with. So I will probably make them spawn with tridents only in deep ocean biomes. You might think that this will make getting the trident way too difficult, and I understand, which is exactly why I want it to be way more likely for the drowned to drop the trident if it's holding one. I think this will be a good balancing change because, for example, let's imagine they have spears, which they don't exactly know how to use spears. Unfortunately, this might be changed in the future snapshots, but we don't know. But it'd still be cool, they can still use the jab attack of the spear. So I think it's alright to give spears to the drowned in shallow waters, and then give them tridents only in the deep oceans. Not only is this fair to the early game, because you will not be harassed by enemies that are ridiculously overpowered for your current level of the game, but when you do want to get a trident, you will know where to look, and you will be much more likely to get some. So I think it's a fantastic balancing change to the game, and one of the things that I'm most excited about adding to mob tweaks in this upcoming update. And this also will relate to armor. For example, right now we can have skeletons spawning with copper armor in the Nether, even though it's impossible to get copper in the Nether. So that's going to be changed, and the different armor that enemies can wear would also be depending on the biome and how far along in the game you are. So I'm excited to add these kinds of things. They're a little touches, but I think they really do a lot to sell you on the world of Minecraft. And I think it's a good thing to add to the mob tweaks data pack. And there's also the previous thing that I mentioned in my other videos on mob tweaks. I want to look at every single mob and then at every single attribute that we have in this game and consider what attributes I should change for which mob to make them behave more like you would expect. I think that's something that Mojang often misses because, I mean, there's so many attributes and so many mobs, you can't really think of everything you can do with this. But I think it's something that should be in the game because it just makes the world feel more thought out and logical. And this could bring a lot of variety and interest to your encounters with the mobs, which you are already used to. And yeah, sorry if the video was kind of boring to watch. I just didn't have a lot of time to edit something together that would be really showing everything off. But I hope you guys are interested in all of these features. Let me know if you have any ideas of what I can add to my data packs, the ones that I mentioned today at least. And yeah, I'm very excited for this next drop. It's going to be great. I have a lot of cool ideas for what I would like to add, especially to mob tweaks. Either way, thank you for watching. Don't forget to smash subscribe, ring my bell, and as always, stay. Since this is a data pack, I don't expect people to be playing with it. You know what?